Joining us now, the man of the hour, U.S. Senator Mark Warner. Senator, great to have you with us.
Well, thanks, John. I'm looking forward to Thanksgiving next week as well, my favorite holiday of the year.
Well, so it is mine, and we want to offer you congratulations on your election to a second term, sir, in Virginia.
Well, let's put it like this. It was a lot longer night than I anticipated, but end of the day, it in a sea of otherwise Democrats losing all over the country, we stepped up and stepped through. So ready to go back to work.
A win is a win. Now, I don't want to intimidate you, Senator, with my expert political prognostication, but once again, I was right on target. I had you on Election Day. I predicted that the Republicans would pick up 9 seats. That is going to happen after December 5th. I predicted that you would win Virginia, and I predicted that the Republicans in the House would pick up 13 seats. So, sir, I ran the table.
Well, I got to tell you, Larry Sabato, watch out. There's a new sheriff in town.
I know, and I don't even have to have a toupee on. I'm just bald. Sad story, 3 Americans killed yesterday by axe-wielding Palestinians in this Jerusalem synagogue attack. I mean, what is going on in there?
Well, what's going on is that I think you're seeing the Palestinian Authority and Abbas lose control over the more radical elements on the Palestinian side. I think it's terribly important that we stand by Israel at this point, both in terms of its own domestic security, but more importantly, that we recognize in terms of a circumstance with Iran that no deal is better than a bad deal.
Now, sir, what do you have to say?
No, I'm sorry. Let me restate that. That no deal. Yeah, I think I may have misdone my metaphor there. That I would rather see no deal than see a bad deal, and a deal that I'm looking for, and I think Congress ought to have a role in this, is one that leads to not slowing down, but actually dismantling Iran's capabilities.
Well, that seems to be at odds, though, with the actions from this current administration. Have you had an opportunity to sit down with the president or his security team, because it looks like they seem to be, the Secretary of State seems to be very willing to try to make some deal with Iran?
Well, clearly, if there is a good deal in terms of long-term stability for the region, in terms of Israel's long-term stability, as well as, let's face it, the Saudis, the Turks, the Egyptians, and others, you don't want to send an arms race off. But I have been worried throughout this negotiation that the Iranians may be playing rope-a-dope, and the clock is ticking. And I and others I know in both parties, Senator Menendez made a very strong statement earlier this week. I was putting out a statement today. I want to make sure that Congress has a role in this going forward.
Let's get off foreign policy for just 1 second, get to the Keystone Pipeline. Senator Warner, you've been a tireless advocate for that. It's not gone well within the Democratic Party as a whole. You've got a vote coming up on the pipeline today. Can you reach that magic number of 60?
Well, let me explain. I know your listening audience, John, is a bit more conservative. I came to this saying, let me look at the science. The Canadians had already decided to extract this oil. Actually, they've changed part of their processes, so it's no longer as clear-cut. The clear-cut mining, they're actually doing more deep well mining. I think there's not been a recognition by some of the environmental community that they've changed their process. Mm-hmm. Secondly, the State Department, what I'd said along the way, let's let the State Department process play out. It is played out. Review after review has said that this is not, since most of the pipelines being built, we're talking about simply one connecting component. To me, this makes sense. I don't think it's a game changer in terms of, I think sometimes the jobs that are being created are has been exaggerated in terms of the number of permanent jobs. But I think just in terms of a normal overarching energy policy, all of the above, Keystone ought to be part of this. I think the public count is at 59 at this point. I know Mary Lander's working her heart out trying to see if she can pick up a 60th vote. I'll be disappointed if we don't get that 60th vote, because even amongst some of the members that might be retiring or others, to show, to step up for Mary, but also to say that we need to get this out. And clearly the president then will still have options if he chooses to veto it. But I think showing that the Congress can actually agree on something and get something on the president's desk is an important symbolic act as well.
Senator, if you fall short at 59, it doesn't get to the president's desk. If you get 60, it does. At that junction in time, what would you expect President Obama to do?
Well, I mean, I've heard rumors that he might veto it, but again, I would go back to what I had talked to folks about 2 years ago was, I was the president, I might say, all right, I'll support this if you will also send me the bipartisan legislation, for example, Shaheen Portman, which was a energy conservation bill, broadly supported, broadly bipartisan. I mean, the cheapest energy we can create in this country is the energy we don't use, and this is not some over-the-top huge mandate, but it would try to help set standards and guidelines, voluntary for energy conservation, or what I like to call energy productivity. Force that out of the Congress as a pair with Keystone, and suddenly you're getting the framework of an energy policy that we've been candidly lacking.
We're with U.S. Senator from Virginia, Mark Warner. The president, Senator, has said over the next several weeks that he may exhort to an executive order to create what is so-called amnesty for up to 5, 8, 7 million people that are here illegally. Some conservatives are saying, and many lawmakers are saying, that is outside of the legal boundaries of the Constitution. Do you think the president should go forward with this fiat or work through the House and the Senate?
Look, John, as somebody who strongly supports immigration reform, and trying to get a whole group of folks that are in the shadows, out of the shadows, into some level of legal status, I think the best way to do that is through legislation. Mm-hmm. I also understand that the concern that a Senate bill that may not have been perfect, but I think had all of the key component parts, has been languishing for well over a year. I always expected that the House might come back with many of the components of the Senate bill, dealing with the Dreamers, dealing with H-1B, dealing with border security, but perhaps with some other form of legal status for the non-Dreamer portion of the undocumented. And that would have been, a legitimate response, and you could have had a negotiation. I don't believe, and I've not done all the research, but having done research on what President Bush had done in the past in terms of executive orders around immigration that took subsets of the undocumented and changed their status, I don't believe that what President Obama is proposing is extrajudicial or somehow different than what President Bush had done in past executive actions. I do know that it will create a firestorm where my hope was, I heard the electorate. They want us to work together. I don't believe it was as much an embracing of Republicans as it was a statement that said, hey, everybody, Warner, don't just talk about being bipartisan, actually get some stuff done. Mm-hmm. And as I said, election night, said subsequently, I'll work with anybody who's actually in good faith going to be willing to get stuff done. Perhaps there may be a window here where the president, and again, it's not like the president has shared with me what his executive order is going to look like. I probably know less than I know as little as most of the listening public, and frankly most of the members of Congress. There may be some executive order with a timeline that may throw it back in and say, all right, here's an executive order, but it doesn't go into effect for X days. Congress, that's enough time for you to act because we know the parameters of this legislation, and maybe that may be a spurring way to action.
Okay, that's
trying to be an optimist, John.
No, look, that's fair enough. It sounds like what you're saying is at the end of the day, you would prefer this to be solved legislatively rather than through a series of executive orders, right?
Absolutely. Well, as much because, whatever number of people that are undocumented that are going to be gained some level of security, executive orders can be undone by future presidents.
Right.
And I'm not sure a 2-year window when you're going to have another president 2 years down the line, he or she may be Democrat, she may be Republican, and it's not going to give the kind of long-term security that we need because that's still, an executive order alone, if then everything else on immigration grinds to a halt, still means we're not dealing with border security, still means we're not dealing with H-1B in terms of high-tech workers. It still means we're not dealing with the very great needs we have, for example, in Virginia on H-2B, which are seafood workers and other ag-related workers. Mm-hmm. It's only one piece of a very complicated problem. The sooner that we can fix the whole problem. One of the things that I think, John, that the country so desperately needs, and whether it's immigration, on whether it's on debt issues, whether it's you take any one of the myriad of issues that our country faces, we got to show that we can still cover. Right. We got to show that we may not come up with a perfect solution, but let's kind of be what we are as Americans. Where you see a problem, you fix it, you roll on to the next problem, and if you don't fix it 100% right, you come back and retinker with it after the fact. But action is needed rather than the kind of paralysis of gridlock that we've got right now.
Can't argue with that. We need to, I think you're 100% correct. We need to find a way to make this work within the legal system we have within. I want to get back to ISIS for a second. Another beheading, unfortunately, over the weekend. Your colleague, junior senator from Virginia, Tim Kaine, has been very direct in saying that the president should come to Congress and ask for a formal declaration of war. Where, in your mind, Senator, is this crisis, this war with ISIS headed?
Well, I sit on the Intel Committee, and suffice it to say that this is a extraordinarily complex challenge that where I will give the president some credit is by marshaling some coalition forces to actually have Arab nations not simply providing money, but actually flying airplanes is a major step in the right direction. I agree with Tim. We need, whether it is a short, it may not be a full declaration of war, but it is clearly an authorization of the use of force. Mm-hmm. I think Tim was right on that from day one. I think that he was right when he and others said we shouldn't even have broken for the campaign break. We should have stayed in Washington and done our job and had that debate. Where I would probably differ from Tim, and I give him a lot of credit for starting this debate and being so stringent on it, I wouldn't put quite as many restrictions on that authorization of the use of forces as I think Tim would. I think you have to allow for some military flexibility, and that means the ability to have some boots on the ground if our military commanders require that. It's not something I'm hoping for. It's not something I'm wishing. But in a sense, since we have boots on the ground already, I'm afraid that we're going to get ourselves caught in some, we're going to have created another set of bright lines that we may not be able to adhere to. So I would be looking at an authorization use of force that would probably be more broadly written than some of my colleagues.
So right now, the actions with ISIS, are we in what you might say, or as one of your colleagues from Kentucky said, an illegal war?
I don't. I know. Listen, I think that there's an arguable claim that the 2002 authorization of use of force, which has been used by both this president and by President Bush repeatedly, that I'm sure there is a legalistic argument to make the case. End of the day, one of the reasons why I never practiced law, arguing on the head of the pin on this is not where I'm at. I think for the confidence of the American public and for the fact that directly or indirectly we're going to put troops in harm's way, Congress needs to not sit in the cheap seats and simply critique the president when things go wrong, but we need to put our names, either say yay or nay and put our names on the line in endorsing this policy. I think that ISIL is a threat to the region, and I think it is a more immediate threat to Europe, and I think it is an indirect but growing threat to our country. So I believe it needs to be eradicated, and I would support an authorization to use of force that would give our military the tools they need to do the job.
Final question, Senator Warner. I want to commend your decision the other day to vote along with Tim Kaine in opposition to Harry Reid for minority leader of your party in the Senate. I, like many others, thought that Senator Reid turned out to be a very divisive figure. Is there going to be any retaliation from that within your own caucus?
Well, as close-watched Capitol Hill watchers may have noted, I've over the last 5 years, it's one of the ironies of Mr. Gillespie's campaign against me, where he ran that I was something that I was not. I've paid some price over the last few years in terms of committee assignments and roles for taking for taking positions that have been a lot more bipartisan, for taking actions like the Gang of Six and others that frankly made both political parties mad. I'm going to do more of that going forward. I don't believe there'll be a retaliation. I will say that I felt obligated in light of the debate when I was asked, when I said that both parties could do better in terms of their leadership. I only got a chance to vote on one side of that equation, and I did what I said I was going to do in the campaign.
Look, I have said that you, Senator Warner, are in a position now to be one of the most powerful men in America, because the new majority leader, incoming Mitch McConnell, is going to have to work across the aisle to get anything done. You have been the one senator throughout the campaign who has said that you're willing to do that. How is your relationship with the incoming majority leader, and how do you see yourself in that role?
Well, I probably have stronger relations with a number of my other Republican colleagues than I do with Leader McConnell. I don't know him as well. I think the challenge, and I think both Senator Reid and Senator McConnell, there is a natural challenge to start with your whole team and then build from there. I think at times when the Democrats were in control, when you always started with 55 and then you're looking for 5 more to get to 60, by nature, that means your legislation is going to be probably more slightly center-left because you want to keep everybody on your team together. The question for Senator McConnell, since I think he's going to have a caucus it's even going to be more diverse than the Democratic caucus has been,
right?
Is is he going to be willing to say, okay, to some on the more extreme, hey, we're willing to lose a few Republicans if there is a big enough block of Democrats that might put together a more moderate bipartisan bill. And time's going to tell. I think there's an awful lot of folks who, in both parties, who want the Senate to get back to the days when we actually vote. And those votes will make some people mad, but you don't want to vote and make people mad. You shouldn't sign up for this job. And that we ought to do more than appoint deputy secretaries and a few ambassadors. and that there's an awful lot of us, a very large number of folks who know we can't keep kicking the can on the problems in the nation.
All right, that is going to be the final word. We want to thank Senator Mark Warner for being with us. Senator, we wish you and your family a fabulous holiday, a great Turkey Day, and we really appreciate your being with us. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Sean. Take care.